This is the Map Scout Challenge brought to you by OnX, where we examine the map, assess features like terrain, habitat, and access, then go out and rip it apart in person.
And right now we're gonna show you the results, no holds barred, so that next time you go to public land, you have the confidence to scout, hunt, and kill whatever you're after.
Seriously just happened.
What's happening, everybody? It's another edition of Map Scout Challenge. K.C.'s behind the camera. I'm sitting here. We're about to hop out and go check a spot out here on Tawakoni WMA. We had these coordinates sent to us recently in a social media message, I guess. And so we're gonna head out and look at this place. But one thing that we're doing today on this WMA is we're trying to avoid tons of water, because we've had a lot of it lately. We've had a lot of rain, and the Sabine tends to flood and get out over its banks really easily. So what we're looking for in this area is basically any soft spots between human pressure, because there's a lot of human pressure, a lot of hunter pressure on this property in particular, being that it's close to the Metroplex for a lot of guys on the east side of the Metroplex especially. And then we're also looking for high ground right now. So we're gonna hang a few cameras. This is right in our backyard. We have hunted here. We will hunt here in the future, and we're excited to get out and go do it.
We like to talk about the strategy and then remember that we actually are trying to put content out for you to also look at. So we had to turn the cameras on because we were deep in thought. Tyler and I were sitting here talking about some philosophy on deer and sanctuaries and how they react to human pressure versus habitat and all that kind of stuff. And this is a place where most of the really good habitat is on the public parcel. Like, there's a lot of bottom land, okay? And then there's this thing right over here that's private, but we can tell that it doesn't hardly get any use.
It's gated, like government gating.
Yes, exactly. So not a lot of people going in there jacking around. And there are some windrows and things. Like, there's a place where a deer could live out there if it wanted to. So we're trying to decide if deer are going to be using that too, even though it's not like ideal habitat, but it's super safe, versus the public over here where it's not that safe, but it's really good looking habitat. It's probably going to be a mixture of both. But what we're trying to decide is, are they going to be relating inwardly to this public, or is it going to be a place that they're going to just be walking through? And I don't know if we can tell that from the truck, and that's why we get out and put our boots on and go out there and walk around. But it's nice to kind of draw some assumptions before we get out there. This map dot that we were seeing is real close to the road, but it's a pretty good looking spot too. So maybe it could be one of those little honey hole things. I do think it's up in a lot of cedars though, just after we pulled up here. That's what it looks like. And deer will use cedars, but if they're real thick, it usually ends up being just hog fest and too much for the deer. Yeah. So we'll go see what this spot's all about, and then kind of I guess draw some assumptions from there. What do you think?
Yeah, another thing that we also talked about off camera earlier is that a lot of times when you look, so for instance, there are several different tracks here on Tawakoni WMA that you can hunt, and they're all pretty small, honestly. Mm-hmm. And this one that we're at is the big one. So if you're, when people go to Map Scout this stuff, and I know I've been guilty of this in the past when I looked at this WMA years ago for the first time, you're drawn to the largest one because you're like, oh, I can, if it's 200 acres, I can't get away from anybody in that, so I'm going to go look at the biggest one. And there's a mile and a quarter, mile and a half I can walk in there, and I can do that, and so people are always looking at the big track. How can I get into the big track and get away from people? So maybe if we map scout enough here, when we get back in the truck, we can find that little honey hole on a smaller track. Who knows? I do think there's going to be deer on this track for sure, so we're just going to have to figure out if anything's in this particular this area right here. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people also kind of fall into, and I've been pretty guilty of in the past, is like really wanting to hunt the bottom, like down there in the river bottom. and that's what this place is going to have a lot of. But
we're kind of on a hill there.
Yeah, we're on a hill right here, but it drops off down in there to it. But right now, a lot of it's gonna be flooded, and you can deal with that in season. And the other thing is when you get down in that really river bottom flat stuff that's like kind of old growth hardwoods with some type of, you know, low growth briars or whatever, and it just looks real monotonous. Like, it gets real hard to pattern deer down there, like super hard. There's probably some big ones down there, but is it practical to hunt there if you're trying to be efficient and effective? I don't know.
I know.
It's
I feel
tough.
the same way. Like, we've talked about it before. The DMA, the deer movement areas, become hundreds of yards wide down there.
Exactly.
So,
like that, you could be almost in the right spot, but a giant buck walked 200 yards from you, and like you did everything right. It's just he has such a large area he can cover through.
Yeah, it's the same. There's nothing that funnels in one way or the other.
Yeah.
Day to day. So anyway, let's go check it out, man.
Sounds good to me.
We are excited. Tyler found a track in the truck.
Trail there too.
Yeah, on this trail, and the truck's 30 yards away right over there. So, like, it's almost like everywhere we go map scout, things are always better than we think they're gonna be. So that's a good feeling.
It almost feels like you can see this green grass out here in the road ditch. Maybe that's like a food source essentially this time of year. I'm sure there's a bunch of good ryegrass growing up right there. But there are for sure tracks, like in this, fresh tracks in this stuff right here in this trail. Like a pretty decent deer track. So KC being the, what is it, a botanist? Are you a botanist?
Orchardist.
Orchardist that he is, noticed quickly that there's a few persimmon trees out here, and then this one is actually a big persimmon tree. And as you can see here, it's a female, so it produces fruits. That's a dried up fruit from last year. And I happen to know a guy very well that shot a deer in this area, a big deer that was patterned early season on persimmons. I'm actually a guy that also shot a Texas deer last year on public that was patterned off of persimmons. And so that's something to think about in October and November. I shot that deer early November. He shot that deer, I think, mid-October. So in that time frame, the persimmons are going to be something that we can key in on. Now, this is definitely in the wide open, but if you know that deer are feeding here at night, then you can pattern them back here, maybe more towards the coordinates we were sent, you know, right before dark or something like that in the early season.
Tyler mentioned that I like trees or whatever, so I've been studying on this stuff a lot lately just because I like trees, not so much for the wildlife side of things, but it helps a lot with the wildlife side of stuff. The way that you can spot a persimmon tree from the road is that on these big mature trees, you can look at the bark. They have the most alligator or crocodile type bark of any tree that you'll see. You see how this is really dark inside the cracks and it really looks like scales? You can tell right away that that's a persimmon tree. And then, like he said, this is a fruiting one because it is a female. Persimmons they actually have two sexes of tree. They have males and females. Just because you find persimmon green leaves doesn't mean there's gonna be persimmons on it in the fall. You have to really look at the tree and see. But if you look, the flowers look differently and you can see a shriveled up little baby green persimmon on there. I can't show you one now because it hasn't bloomed out yet, but that will happen. Good looking persimmon trees. There's some fruit caps still attached up there.
Sure is.
Another big old female tree. How about you, female tree? Cool. That one's over there.
In your baby. Tracks.
Some of these are dead. All these are persimmons. Early October, money.
Money in the bank. There's also a
Maybe even late October.
pool right here. So when it's hot in October, they can get them a sip too. Man, stuff's pretty thick right in here.
Good little raccoon trail.
It's a big.
Boy, howdy. You find a persimmon ticket like this? Makes me want to drop a crappie jig in there and see what happens. Some browsed off honeysuckle here. Oh, there's an opening in the fence.
Yep. That's where I would sit. Yep.
Okay, so we were getting distracted by deer tracks and then realized we needed to go to the map dot actually. So we cut back this direction on this like cedar fence line trail that we were finding tracks on, and then we found this intersection where there's a definite hole in the fence. Great deer trail going through here. Tracks, Tyler found tracks on it over there. So I'm gonna definitely mark this as a trail on the map. And I think that especially when those persimmons start dropping out there in the late fall or early fall, like you could, I would almost guarantee you could sit up right in here and at least have an opportunity to shoot a doe. So really cool spot, not far from the road, but still a pretty good looking hunting spot, to tell you the truth. Okay, so this is the map dot that we were sent. It's right behind this pond right here, and looking at it, yeah, looking on the map, it doesn't like look that great. But when you get in here, it's way more open. It's not a bad cedar thicket like I assumed.
Right.
There's Mexican plums,
Yep.
pecans, and most importantly, a ton of persimmons in here.
Yep.
Along with cover and water oaks that are going to provide late season food. So you add that with a killer trail that we've got going right here, and it looks like a bad to the bone spot.
The Mexican plums are going to put off before deer season probably.
Or
right?
yeah, right at early deer. But
yeah,
it'll get them here, and
yeah,
then they'll be here for the persimmons.
Yeah. Whatever else. And then, you know, as far as pecans go, that's more of a hog food source around here probably. But that's still fun, right? It's still targets. And there's an old culvert right here, it looks like, and that's right where these deer are crossing. But basically every tree you see in here that's got like 1 to 2 inch leaves on it is a Mexican plum, and there's a bunch of little ones. So if you're having trouble seeing the small ones, you know, because their bark doesn't quite look like a normal Mexican plum, it's because of they're just small, but you can tell what they are with the way their leaves are already coming out. So lots of cool things going on right here. Any other thoughts?
It's a hunting spot.
It is, for sure. We'll probably hang a camera right in here.
Hey, you think you know us or what? That gun, that little baby dog.
I'm gonna
Hide that. All right, so we're gonna hang the Exodus right here on this plum or maybe this hackberry, one or the other. We just actually ran into some guys that were running dogs out here. They were rabbit dogs, but they didn't have guns on them. They're just running them to just keep the dogs in shape, that kind of thing. So we're gonna hang the Exodus right now on this trail and hope that we get some good pictures right in here. The good thing about that camera is it's got a really good trigger speed, and also it's really it figures out the exposure really fast. So in low light situations like in here, it's gonna get dark pretty quick with these cedars around and that kind of thing, and it's gonna have a tough time figuring out exposure sometimes up in this like splotchy canopy here. So anyway,
and it's got a security code, which also is handy when you see people around.
That's right.
All right, got the security code enabled. Put this thing on hybrid mode. It's gonna take a photo and it's gonna take a 5-second video of this little section right here, and then I turn the trigger delay down to 3 seconds. That might not be a good call. I don't know. Tyler and I are going to discuss that a little bit more after we get done recording here. But the way I see it, we're going to record a short video. That way we're not taking up a bunch of time. But it's a short trigger delay in case there's a group of deer that come through. It'll get that next deer that comes through. If not, then you just have one 5-second video instead of like a 15 or 20-second clip that's taking up a ton of room on your camera. So that's what we're going to do. Going to make sure the password and make sure we remember that. And then I'm going to hang it up here, point it down that trail, and get some pictures of some giant bucks. I mean, oh, we need to mark that camera on the map.
We did.
Like, where do we put that thing? I don't know. What about these? Damn it.
Can't find. Lord knows that you do this all the time. But baby, can I get a name for you, sweet thing? Don't tell me any lies, 'cause I ain't playing no games. Saw you walking down the street just to break your necks, and all I wanna know is, can I see you again?
Pretty cool little rub on. There's one right there, one on that cedar, one on this good sized little willow oak here, and one on that cedar. And there's probably more moving up and down this creek, and that's what we're gonna do right quick and just see what all we can find.
What you got there?
These are my new hunting shoes.
I think they look like your new painting shoes.
It's about the same color.
Somebody was they were running so hard to their stand they just ran out.
They just ran out their shoes. You're the guy with the plan. Give me that camera. What's the plan?
We're going through here. We're going through here. We're gonna head down that trail where every human has headed down in the last
human head.
7 months. And we're gonna find deer trails on the north side property boundary here, going to some feeders back here, I think is what they're going to. But I saw some trails when I was in here last year, so we're gonna go check that out.
Just getting video. There are deer tracks. Right there.
Video? We should probably get video. It's probably the only tracks we'll see.
I got some on this. These aren't as sticky, so.
Alright, so I was in here last year, and I think like you can see some of the oaks back in here, some cedars, that kind of thing. But I think this little spot right in here is cedar elm type stuff, like small cedar elm flats. And so I think there was trails that kind of weave through there. It's kind of like one of our DMAs where you're like, I don't really know exactly which trail to sit on, but at any moment one of these 3 or 4 trails could be the right one. So apparently this guy has a feeder out here too, down in here, but there's a feeder on this guy's property, and looks like a box blind. Cedar elms are also budding out this time of year and a pretty good food source for deer in March, so if we were to hang a camera we might see some movement in there and some browse going on. So whatever, let's keep going. there's a scrape here. Just walking through, kind of walking through the easiest travel route, which is what our DMA theory is based around. When you get to these big thickets and walls of just greenbrier, essentially, you just got to walk in between, and you usually end up walking down a trail. That's kind of the trail for that particular spot, and that's what it is here. Got a licking branch, scrape, and then KC noticed a pretty sizable rub on that cedar tree over there. So I'm going to mark this. You can see the knot in it or whatever where it's probably been hit. This is probably signpost, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You also can see old bark rub, you know, or whatever. You can tell it's definitely signpost. Which is weird. There's another one on that boat arc right there. This guy has marked. Why this thing? It's like very straight. I don't know. There's not really like a lick. Or, well, that's a track right there. I mean, that's a somewhat fresh scrape though.
So Tyler just found that really fresh scrape. We walked up a little bit further, and there are 3 trails that come together. One kind of heading east, one kind of heading northwest, one southwest right here. And just make a triangle right here in like a little 20-yard area. Those cedar trees would be a perfect place to hang a stand. I mean, you don't even need steps. You can go right up that thing, put your stand in there, and then all of a sudden you're hunting some really great trails for pigs and deer right here, really not far from the parking lot, to tell you the truth of the matter. And I mean, there's evidence that they're here. Now you might have to deal with some pressure a little bit or whatever, but that's gonna be public land in Texas. So you just gotta hunt it on the right wind, on the right day, and you can kill something here.
Save. I mean, I would probably, because we're not very far from parking lot and there is some human sign in here, which there's going to be a lot of pressure on this particular spot of this property especially, but I would come up in here and I would probably hang like a cheap trail camera that you don't mind getting stolen, or if you know, has a good warranty or something like that. And I would hang it on one of these scrapes kind of early season probably, and try to see if deer are actually using this area in the daylight, because if they're not, you know, you don't want to come in here and waste time. It'd be better if you're going to spend a day hunting to just go ahead and get further back if deer are not really using this during the daylight. Now the rut changes everything, so you know, if it's a good cold day in the rut on a Tuesday or a Thursday or something like that, middle of the week, I mean, anything can happen. So, but just a suggestion, probably not hunt this before I know that deer are moving in the daylight in this area. That's probably what's happening there. Do you think that that's the guy coming in from private? Because that's a big old stand to haul in here. This stuff's thick.
Dude, people know no bounds about how far they will carry a ladder stand.
I don't get it. I would not carry a ladder stand, especially in the heat. It'd have to be November, December before I did that. Well, that is a pretty large scrape. Both these branches are broken. So somebody's hunted here in the past. There's like some hinge cut trees and that kind of thing. Definitely hinge cut while it was illegal to do so, I believe. But there's some old boards where an old stand was hung one time. So I like those areas because those are usually, you know, they were private at one point and somebody hunted in there and killed deer in there. There's some oaks in here, a lot of swamp and willow oak type trees, some post oaks, and it's just clear in here. Who knows if that's because somebody cleared it or not, but there's a big hub scrape right
Scrapes
here.
all around this tree, actually. There's another one over here.
some definite stand trees in here. Some good oaks that are straight.
And flags.
And flags. And if you wanted to hunt in here on an easy hunt, same deal. I would just make sure that deer are moving in the daylight. And if they are on one of these scrapes or something like that, come in here and smoke one. Illegal, but it's here, and that is what you were fighting with. Guys that are putting that stuff out. Also, that buck is not going to show up out here, just so you know.
Oh my goodness.
That's the kind of thing that you're going to battle close to the road in a lot of places like this. That's why I think, you know, in a kind of blanket statement here based around this WMA especially, is that you're gonna have a lot of pressure. The best way is to bushwhack in somewhere. You know, you can't just walk down the trail as far as it leads you and then just hop off and expect that you're gonna lose people. You're gonna have to get off in some thick stuff and be pretty far. I mean, going down the trail a good ways is good, but you gotta hop off and get out away from the trail a ways before you really start to lose people, I think. And you're still going to see people out here, I think. So, but it doesn't mean you can't kill a deer, that's for sure.
Hold up, y'alls. We got Tyler and I were talking about some stuff. Ow!
First of all, this is the largest bow arc I may have ever
This is
seen.
a big one. We're talking about some stuff not pertaining to today. And then we were trying to wrap up the video. But we just got to show you this. Alright? And luckily they painted it so they blend in a little bit better.
Is there a hog over there?
Acorn rager. This is what happens when people go hunting public land. Byron. There's a couple old kernels. Here. I'm not going to destroy this, but we're going to fix it for him. It's a bottle of deer cane, which is a drug reference, if you didn't know.
So since this is in our backyard, we noticed a lot of things that held true to our expectations going into this. A few of those things were surprising. So talk about that a little bit, Casey.
Well, one thing that wasn't surprising is the fact that there are a lot of persimmons out there. A whole lot. I knew there'd be some, but man, it's going to be a great place to find deer pretty much throughout the month of October and even into early November, as well as hogs. They're going to hammer them just as much. So it's a great place to kind of target deer and hogs for a food source.
For me, it was surprising knowing how many people use that area, how much hunting pressure it gets, and just all the local pressure of just people being around. There was still quite a bit of daylight movement of deer.
Yeah, and speaking of pressure, one of the things I really noticed is we even saw some guys out there who are out running rabbit dogs. You saw that in the video. They parked at the designated parking area. That's not something you have to do, but that's what they chose to do. And I think that there's going to be a ton of people who do that. They're going to go and find the parking spots, park there as opposed to pulling over on the side of the road. And if you can get away from those parking areas, you really might find a little pocket that has no pressure.
Yeah, also there was a ton of rut sign. I was very surprised to see all the scrapes and rubs that were in there, being that it's East Texas, being that there's a lot of people around. So let's kind of talk about the persimmons a little bit, Casey.
Okay, so persimmons are a soft mast. They're going to fall probably before most of the acorns do around these parts of East Texas. And the deer absolutely love them. They're very sweet, but usually they don't fall until kind of second week of October, and then kind of leading into November. Really kind of depends on the frost and stuff that we get through those times. And deer will go to them. Now that might be nighttime movement because you're in a high pressure area, but maybe it's a good place to hang a trail camera. Come that time of year, you can go out there, check that camera, see what's hitting those persimmons at night, and then backtrack them maybe to some bedding or something that you'd found scouting previously.
That's right, and the place that we were sent, the actual map dot, we hung a camera there, or at least very, very close, and there was daylight movement at that camera. And so I would assume that if you look at the relationship between those persimmons and that daylight movement on that camera, that somewhere in there, if not at the camera, you're going to have deer that are moving to persimmons that are still in daylight. And so I know the season's changed, things are going to be different in late September and October, but I think that you can still find a place in between, somewhere right in there back in those woods, where deer are coming from those persimmons and going to eat. But hanging a trail camera at those persimmons would be a good way to be non-invasive, not get your scent all up in there, figure out what the game plan is before you go in on opening day.
Yeah, we know that where we hung that camera, that's pretty much a perennial trail. Deer are always, and hogs too, are always using that little cut through right behind that pool, that pond, because that's the only place they can get through right there, and it pinches back down to a creek. So no matter what time of year, that's going to be a hunting spot, and you can kind of figure that whoever is going out there and eating those persimmons at night can probably be shot right there, maybe as a staging area or right before dark.
That's right. And back to the camera there, like we talked about, there was a ton of rut sign, there was a ton of sign on the trail going to the persimmon or those persimmon trees. And I think that during the rut that you could hang right there at that culvert, and that would be a great place for you to be during the rut, because the deer, obviously there is some competition for the bucks there because they're laying down a lot of sign. And I think it could be a really good thing for you if you wanted to hunt the heart of the rut, which is going to be about mid-November in that area.
But we were in there late February, right? Finding freshly scraped scrapes.
Yeah.
So the thing is with East Texas, and probably a lot of Texas, is you don't have the traditional Midwestern rut dates. You're going to have a rut that kind of trickles on throughout December, even into January and even February, as we saw the sign there. Now, given deer will use scrapes all year long, but usually that's just with licking branches. These were, definite claw marks or hoof marks in the dirt. So don't think that when we say rut, we just mean the first 2 weeks of November. There's a good chance you can go in there, hang on a scrape December 28th, and be able to get a shot at a buck.
Sure. So after being on this place several times, and especially in this last session that we had, the trail camera data that we pulled and everything, we picked out a few spots that we think would be good in that area based off of the different things that we experienced while we were out there. So K.C., talk about yours first.
Okay, so we hung the camera right here at the backside of this pool, pond, lake, whatever you want to call it, with a fallow field out here in the front. So I actually found a place that's kind of like that. That is right here. So it's kind of a little separate piece of the WMA, a little small track here, and you have fallow field kind of intermittent with some timber and all that here. I'm kind of assuming that there might be some persimmons or something like that here, or at least a bunch of forbs for deer to feed on. And if you look right here, there's a creek that runs right along the back side of this WMA, and then right there is a pool that I'm assuming has a dam right there, and I'm thinking that you're going to have a very similar situation where deer are kind of using this tree line right here at the back in accordance with the way the creek runs through here. I mean, what's the line distance right here? You're going to have from the middle of the creek to the pond is only 119 yards, so you can about near cover the whole thing by setting up right here. You can see at least everything between you and the creek, right? And then if you zoom in real tight right here, there is some trails that run through here. Now, I don't know, those might be pig trails, might be deer trails, it might be old human trails. I don't know, but you want to get in there and see. Either way, I think it sets up to be a pretty good looking spot for, or at least if you're trying to match up to what we've done in the past.
I actually have chosen a spot, the second place that we went in and did some searching that had all the acorn range and everything around it, close to the trailhead there. That's a big piece of property, and I actually found a place that is, I found this several years ago when I was first looking at this WMA, that I think would be really good. If you were to walk in, it would be quite a distance to walk in. I think you're going to leave a lot of the crowd in this area. There's also ways to launch that are pretty close and drive a boat into this old river system and just hop in right there and be super quiet and stealthy. But anyway, this is basically just what you can tell is kind of almost like an island out in the middle of probably what's buckbrush and that kind of thing, just swampy area. And there are a ton of oak trees on this little island. There's another one that sticks off the creek right here as well. But I think that this would be a great place to kill a deer at any time of the year that there are either acorns falling or that the does are coming into heat pretty much, walking up and down this river system right here on the Sabine. So that's kind of my choice. I think KC talked about it earlier, but guys tend to use the parking area and walk in from the traditional parking areas. So to get away from that, you either have to go a long ways in, or you have to jump in from a different area like a boat ramp or something like that. So I think this is a great spot to do that. Don't forget, we also have a couple of more Map Scout challenges from Texas coming up, and there are other ones from all over the country pretty much. We did a lot of work this spring and this summer to bring these to you guys. So we're gonna be linking to that up here when we get them live, so go check that out. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps us out tremendously. Hopefully the comments are nice. I know that not if somebody's gonna go, oh, that's my spot, you know, or whatever, and we're sorry, we're not trying to do that. We're just trying to help out new hunters who have been reaching out to us a lot lately. With the pandemic stuff that happened this spring and summer, people are getting into hunting and they wanna know how to do it. We're trying to give them a head start because I know this stuff can be frustrating, especially in states like Texas that have limited public land and limited animals on there, if you don't include hogs. So anyway, remember to do all that, and remember, this is your element. Live in it.